Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to November's edition of She Flourishes, a podcast by women and for women. I'm so excited that we have Courtney Denton with us today. She is the head of the Lifehouse Women's Shelter here in Rock Hill. Ladies, if you were able to come to our women's event this past Saturday, Serve His Way, you'll remember that Courtney spoke to us about what it looks like to live missionally as a woman right where we are. So we're so excited, Courtney, to have you here today. So we're going to start just by learning more about who Courtney is. So Courtney, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you for this opportunity. First of all, it's been great to partner together over the last month and preparing and planning for the event. I am Courtney. I'm married to Alex. We've been married for about 9.5 years, and we have 2 children. Blakely, who is almost 7. She's on countdown, less than 20 days till she turns 7. And Banks, our son, just turned 5. And I've lived in our community now for about 22 years.
Wow.
I came to Rock Hill by way of Winthrop. Started in 1999 and graduated in 2003. And I guess like a lot of college students, I thought I would be here for 4 years and maybe move on to another place. But God really rooted me here in my time of being in college. And it's been neat to be a part of this community and to see its growth and development. And 22 years, just a lot has changed. And I think a lot of good changes that have come as a result of that. So
Yeah.
I'm on staff currently as the Director of Women's Ministries at Westminster Presbyterian Church. Just completed my 10th year in that role. And prior to that, served for 10 years locally as the area director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
That's amazing. And how cool is it that you've been here for a while, so you've got to see what God's doing in our community through the years. So
Yes.
that's incredible.
Yes.
I love that. So, guys, like I just said, we had an amazing women's event with Courtney this past Saturday, learning about the Lifehouse Women's Shelter. And so, Courtney, will you just tell us a little bit about this ministry? What is it, and how did it all get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my 22 years of being here in this community, for about 10 years or so, I have been serving our homeless population. I've done that in a couple of different ways. One of the things that I was able to be a part of is helping to start Pathways Community Center, which is a 4-year-old or young, I guess, depending on how you want to say it, resource center for people in our community who are in need of service to be able to go. So it's a one-stop shop that enables people to be able to walk through the doors and gain access to referral and resource for things that they need. And so having been in our community and having served in the nonprofit sector and working with other nonprofits, I just saw how valuable collaboration really is and how helpful it is from a stewardship standpoint to have a place that people can go to be able to get access to things that they need. And we are fortunate now that we have a bus route in our community so people can get on a bus to get around town, but that didn't exist until about 5 years ago. And so it was a lot harder for people to get access to things that they needed. And so being a part of Pathways Community Center, being on the board, we get to hear stories of people that are coming in our community looking for different services and different needs. And in 2020, what became a resounding need that was frequently requested through the doors of Pathways was emergency shelter for women. And I had heard of this need for several months in 2020, but being a board member and sitting in our board meeting in November, much like right now, actually, I was thinking about that. The timing of that meeting, it's almost been exactly 2 years ago this next week. And so as I was sitting there at that meeting, our director at the time just shared of these 2 women who had come in, and one came barefoot and the other came with just the clothes on her back, and both had come in early in the morning after it had gotten down to 25 degrees, which I think we're forecasting that weather again. And so this pattern is familiar. And so they had stayed out that night. It was 25 degrees and they literally nearly froze to death. And so they came that morning and they said, what do? We can't do this again. What resources are available to us in our community so that we're not outside in the cold? And of course, she attempted to make some calls and try to figure out an emergency solution. But sadly, there wasn't a place for these women to be able to sleep that night. And so she's telling us a story as a board, and she says the best that I had to offer these women was a pair of gloves, a pair of socks, and a blanket. And they didn't know each other when they came in the door, but she encouraged them to leave together and find the nearest bush or abandoned building to huddle that night. And much like it does even today, it just grips me that in that moment, the very best thing that our community had to offer these homeless women was a pair of socks, a pair of gloves, and a blanket. And so we went through this meeting, and as we did so, that phrase, "Is this really the best that we have to offer?" just kept playing out in my head, and I just felt a deep sense of conviction and compulsion. And so we get to the end of the meeting, new business is called for, and I said, I apologize that this is maybe more personal than it is Pathways, but when I hear that all we have to offer is a pair of gloves, a pair of socks, and a blanket, I just feel compelled that we need to do something. Well, I didn't know, how could I ever have known how that little seed of conviction and compulsion would birth this vision for the Lifehouse. But God was working in me and others at the same time. And so, the board agreed that we needed to do something. The next question was, what do we do? Mm-hmm. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do, but I knew of this vacant home. I knew that there may be an opportunity for us to help shelter women in a home that had been used for crisis pregnancy, women in crisis pregnancy. But there was no one being served in that home. And I thought perhaps there's an opportunity for me to make an ask and just see. And so by faith, that's what I did. I just stepped out and said, okay, Lord, I don't know where this may go, but I know that you care far more for homeless women in our community than I could ever care. But if you're wanting to use me as an available individual, a resource, to seek to make a difference, I'm here. And so I had lunch with one of the board members, and I asked what their plans were, and she said, we're going to take 90 days to pray about how God would use this home to serve this community. And I thought, well, man, in the 90 days that you're praying, could we use it as a warming shelter for women? That's the cold months of the year. And she said, let me talk to our board, and I'll get back to you. And she did. 24 hours later, she called, and she said, yes, you can use this shelter for this season for women. And so there was an initial opportunity for 90 days as a warming shelter. The Lifehouse is now almost 2 years old, so we have obviously extended beyond 90 days. The board was very gracious after 45 days of calling back and saying, we know how God would want this home to be used, and we would like to donate this property and this home to see this organization continue as a homeless shelter for women in our community. So we, from the initial conversation with her until we opened our doors, December 21st of 2020 was 3.5 weeks. So we worked tirelessly around the clock to make this house ready for women to be home for the holidays. That was so much a part of my heart for them. And it was sweet to see how the community rallied. There was a meeting called with 14 other agency providers in our city, and 14 other yeses, and there was even a donated van that showed up to help transport the women. There were sheets, and there were blankets, and there were comforters, and there were bed frames that were given. Our first night, we had 7 women and 1 child that came through the threshold of the door, and I think several of them fell through the door, to be honest. They were so grateful for this opportunity to have a bed to sleep in. And so we have seen God do exceedingly immeasurably more in the last 2 years, to think about, just stepping out in faith and making an ask and having him answer yes, not just once, but literally hundreds and hundreds of times by those in our community who have said yes to giving, those in our community who have said yes to serving, those in our community who have said yes to partnering. Opportunities to be able to make presentation, to tell the story of how God has been at work in our community. And so this is really his story. The Lifehouse is his story. I feel very fortunate to be a part of it, to be able to share it with our community. And I feel like it's such a picture of what collaboration at its core is really all about. Is, if we don't care who gets the credit, and if we're willing to link our arms together, God can do some amazing work. And so we have served more than 203 women in 2 years, little less than 2 years.
That's amazing.
It is amazing, and it's amazing that those 203 women have a bed to be able to sleep in. And I think it's a hard reality for me when I think about 203 women we've served, because it just shows the need and the growing need in our community. And so I celebrate that we've been able to offer 203 women shelter service, which is our mission, is to provide safe shelter, warm meals, access to laundry and shower services, fellowship. That encouragement goes a long way. And then case management to ensure that they have the starting point on the continuum of care, and that they are continued to be helped along the way. But then it's also a sad reality that that's 203 different women who have needed that type of service in the last 2 years. And that's not all. There's more.
Yeah, there's more.
There's a wait list that is present every day with us. There are calls that come in every day to us. There are a lot of women in our community that are sleeping in their cars. There's a lot of children in our community who are sleeping in cars. And so this need is present. This opportunity was made available, and you see how God is at work to bring those things together. And so in this mission of the Lifehouse, we're expanding. We have the shelter, obviously, of 12 beds. We have an overflow shelter that we call the cottage, which is set up as cot beds right now at a church partner. We are working, actually, demolition just started yesterday at Pathways Community Center to move the cottage permanently to Pathways. And I love this picture that, you don't want this to happen, but if it does happen, that in December or January, 2 women come to Pathways looking for a bed to sleep in, the answer will be yes, there is a bed for you. And it's not even outside of this building. It's just right down the hall. And so I think we've come a long way to be able to have something available to give an answer to that question that is certainly more than gloves, socks, and a blanket for our community. So.
That's amazing. And how cool is it that God just kept opening those doors?
Yes.
And this is something that he's doing in our community. So thank you for being obedient to him. Yeah. And it is so cool to see how God is just providing for their physical needs, but ultimately how you guys are able to talk with him about the Lord and what he's doing. So thank you, Courtney. That's amazing.
Yeah. Some of our sweetest stories are of women who have come to faith. Some come very hopeless. They come very desperate. And to be able to meet them with the love of Jesus and see how those deposits of love and grace and hospitality, then help to shape this desire for what is more. There is something about this experience that's different from me, and that's Jesus. Jesus is in the mix of what we're doing. And there's a Bible study opportunity for women at the shelter on Wednesday evenings that they can take part in. And we have advocates that come alongside of our women and just serve one-on-one, just to be cheerleaders and champions for them. And so all of these things are working to help show the love of Jesus, but also encourage these women to give their life to Christ, because that is where true hope is found, is in him. And so this physical need that is met certainly is a gateway to being able to share about their spiritual need, and that Jesus is there to help meet that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Courtney, for sharing that. Well, Courtney, you're someone I definitely look up to in ministry. So thank you for how you've inspired me to keep loving Jesus. And so I want to ask you a question. As a mom, as a woman who is busy in ministry and, helping with the Lifehouse shelter and the women at your church, how do you daily prioritize time in the Word in those busy seasons?
That's a very fair question. And if I'm honest, that's a hard thing to do on a daily basis. I feel like there's the discipline of faith that says, I'm going to be committed to studying God's Word every day. And there's a longing for that. But then life does get in the way sometimes, and that doesn't always happen. So there's an intentionality that has to be present to prioritize God's Word. And so, I have leaned into specific times in my day. First thing in the morning, before my feet even hit the floor, a lot of times I'm praying and asking God to order my steps and to help me to do the things today that he would have me to do. There can be a lot of tasks that I think ought to be accomplished in a day, but I'm asking the Lord truly, literally, before my feet hit the floor, God, what is it that you would have for me today? And help me to rest in the things that I don't do, knowing that those weren't the things that you had for me. And so, I really seek to be intentional and starting my day with moments with the Lord and ending my day with moments of the Lord. And then certainly throughout the day, finding ways to read God's Word. And so thankfully there's resources too. Like, there's ways to listen to the Bible. So if I'm in the car, sometimes I'm just listening to God's Word play. I lean on the Dwell Bible app, which has been a good resource for me. I've enjoyed that.
And there's podcasts.
And there's podcasts. So the audible way of listening to God's Word has definitely been something in my life over the last couple of years that have been a resource for me and helping me to prioritize that time. Right now, we as a women's ministry at our church, we're studying the book of Isaiah, which is it's a hard book. It's a challenging book. It's a vision that God has given, and so spending time in Isaiah certainly has reminded me of this love for God's Word. But even in the hard places of God's word, how the Spirit will meet us there and how he will help us to be able to discern what is in God's word. And so, we've encouraged our women, and this is certainly true of me too, to find 15 to 20 minutes a day that you're just turning the pages of God's word, that you're reading God's word. And so for us right now, we're spending a lot of time in Isaiah, which has us reading a lot of other chapters of the Bible too, books of the Bible too. But I think that the point of really all of that, the prioritization of studying God's word is an intentionality. And it's often been said that things that may feel like drudgery eventually become a discipline, and the things that are a discipline become a delight. And I think that there is true delight in the study of God's word. So whether it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 50 minutes a day, God's word does not return void. And so it's life-giving. It's there for us. And so it's important that we turn to that source as the source of our strength and our nourishment for the day. Like, we need our daily bread, and he's given it to us in his word. So I think intentionality is a big part of how I prioritize it. I try to start my day with it. I try to end my day with it. And then throughout the day, of course, there's other times where I'm trying to focus in on spending time with them. But I just want to say for all of us that there's grace when we don't have those 15 minutes a day, because there are days that I don't, and I haven't made that time. And so I know that there's grace, that it's more about the heart than it is about, just this rhythm or routine that we feel like we have to do. He's far more pleased with our heart's motive being pure in his study than it is just a rote practice that we do. So to delight in God's word is to spend time in his word. So finding ways to be able to do that's really important.
Yeah, and I found that, when I'm reading the Bible, it's like so I can know more about him. He already loves me unconditionally. You know, whether I mess up one day and I don't read my Bible on a Monday or I do, he loves me the same.
Exactly.
And so reading God's word helps me tune my heart to see his grace and his mercy, Something practical for me that I've been doing recently is, everything these days is on our phone. Our alarm clocks to get up in the morning.
It is.
Everything's there, right? We can go on Instacart and we can go shop. But one of the things that's really helped me is, like you were saying, before my feet hit the floor in the morning, before my, when my alarm goes off, instead of, going immediately to social media to check my notifications or to go check the weather, I'll just go and read the Bible reading plan from our church, and study that. And that's really helped me before I even hear what the world has to say. I hear what God has to say.
Yes. I'm putting my makeup on in the mornings and I'm listening to God's word. Like, I think that is so important that our minds are set in the right places at the very beginning of our day. So I am with you 100%. I think that's such a great way to give perspective for how we're going to live the other however many minutes of our day is by setting the starting point with God's word.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing that, Courtney. We love hearing about that. So as we wrap up today's podcast, I want to ask Courtney a little bit more about her family. So she's got two incredibly cute kids, guys, Banks and Blakely. They are so cute. And you have a dog, right?
We do, Dolly the dog, yes. Named after Dolly Parton, yes, because we love her.
I love that so much.
Yes.
So you said Blakely will be
7 in less than 20 days. We're on countdown. Her party's coming up, so she's really excited about that. And Banks just turned 5, and and then we have Dolly the dog, and then we love on a lot of other little babies at times too, and kids at times too, because of the work with the Lifehouse. And so we dressed up for Halloween as a family of Gamecock football player, cheerleader. My husband was the coach. We had a baby representing the football, and we had the dog involved and a friend. And but anyway, I jokingly said we were this Gamecock family, but maybe we ought to have been the circus, because some days it feels like more of a circus in our house. But it's fun. We're looking forward to obviously the Christmas season around the corner, and so there's a countdown to birthday, and there's a countdown to Christmas right after it. So all the things. Yes.
Yeah, it's so funny because we have a dog now. Maggie, we got in August, and I never thought I'd be one of those dog moms, but as I'm going through TJ Maxx a few months ago, they had a whole section of dog costumes.
Yes.
And it's not necessary, but I saw that they had a Wonder Woman dog costume, and we love Marvel, and so I bought it. And my husband's like, "Well, do we even have any place to go for Halloween? Are we going to?" And I'm like, "No, she's just going to wear her costume." So it is funny dogs become a part of the family.
Yeah,
so.
that must be a thing. Dolly was Wonder Woman last year. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, that's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this month's podcast. And Courtney, thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. We really are grateful for First Baptist Church. And just as I shared even on Saturday, this is a church with a lot of sweet relationships and friendships. And having served with the pastors here for a number of years, just really grateful for you all and the ways that you are making a difference in our community. And so it's been a blessing to connect with you and to be able to have this time over the last few months. So really, really grateful for this opportunity as well.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. And guys, we'll look forward to seeing you next month for December's edition of She Flourishes. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.